My name's Dave Smith. I'm a blacklisted construction worker, and I'm a core participant in the union strand of the of this inquiry, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Blacklist Support Group, which is a campaign that was set up in 2009 after it was discovered that multinational construction companies were spying on us and blacklisting us because of our trade union activities. When we first talked about blacklisting as trade unionists, the authorities dismissed us as conspiracy theorists. Repeatedly, we were told that this doesn't happen in the UK, but blacklisting isn't a conspiracy theory, it's conspiracy fact. And it's a conspiracy of which not just multinational companies, but the police, political policing units that are part of this inquiry are colluded with. Trade unions first appeared in this country at the time of the Industrial Revolution and the British Empire. At the same time that the ruling class was making dynastic fortunes out of the slave trade, Parliament, the sole preserve of the rich and the wealthy at the time, was passing the Combinations Acts, which made being a member of a trade union illegal and against the law. And ever since that time, this colonial mindset, this anti-union hostility, which also sort of molds in with, mixes in with institutional racism and institutional sexism, has become part of, ingrained in the establishment mindset within the UK. My good friend Lord Hendy has already highlighted the case of the Tolpuddle martyrs in 1834. I don't really expect to go over that, but there was another less well-known example happened in the exact same year, which in 1834 there was a meeting of the master builders in Ludgate Hill in London, in which all of the major employers in the construction industry had a meeting and then decided that what they would introduce was this thing called a document. It's notorious within the trade union movement, where everyone applying to get a job on one of their building projects was forced, every craftsman was forced to sign this document to say that they would never become a member of a union. They weren't a member of a union, and if they were a member of a union, they were sacked or weren't given the job. And in a period before the welfare state, clearly, the impact of this on their families was destitution. Moving on from that, in 1919, an organisation called the Economic League was set up by captains of industry, ex-naval intelligence officers, and Conservative MPs. And in their own words, the purpose of the Economic League was to wage a crusade for capitalism. That was what it was. That's what they said it was for. But what it actually did, of course, was blacklist union activists, left-wing union activists, stop them getting jobs, not just in the construction industry, but across engineering, pharmaceuticals, the mining sector, the public sector, across whole swathe of the British economy. And from its inception, the Economic League had both formal and informal links with the police and the security services. The Economic League was closed down in the early 90s, and in 1993, Cullen McAlpine, a director of Sir Robert McAlpine Limited, bought part of the Economic League's blacklist and set up a new organisation called the Consulting Association, which carried on the work of blacklisting trade unionists in the construction sector. And the companies were involved in that were Balfour Beatty, 44 of the biggest construction companies in the UK were involved in it, but the biggest ones that are household names are the likes of Balfour Beatty, Lang O'Rourke, Costains, Skanska, Kiers, Vinci, BAM, AMEC, and AMI. This organisation, one of the ex-Economic League employees, Ian Kerr, was set up as the chief executive of the Consulting Association, and his job was to collate files on the on union activists like myself and like other core participants in this public inquiry. In 2009, the Information Commissioner's Office raided the offices of the Consulting Association and found files, secret files that the employers were keeping on union activists. And the files include people's name, their address, their national insurance number, sometimes their telephone number, their car registration number, photographs of themselves, sometimes their medical records, information about their families. Certainly, if people, once you were blacklisted, if you ended up getting elected as a shop steward, that would be reported on your blacklist file. If you were involved in a protest or you complained about health and safety, that would be reported on your blacklist file. The Consulting Association didn't have spies on every single building site. What it had was main contacts, what they called main contacts from each of the major construction companies, very often at director level of the companies. And what would happen is a manager on a building site would feed up the information to the director would then feed the information into to Ian Kerr, who would put the information on the blacklist file. But they didn't just keep the blacklist files just for the sake of curiosity. What they used it for was to stop us getting work. So what would happen is any worker who applied to get a job on one of the building sites ran by these major construction firms would send in a list of names to the Consulting Association. Your name and your national insurance number would be checked against this centralised blacklist. And if it came up, if your name came up, you'd be sacked or refused work. And every time they checked a name, it cost £2.20. In the last set of invoices, Sir Robert McAlpine Limited, who built the Olympic Stadium, their last set of invoices was £28,000. This isn't managers having a chat. This is systematic, industry-wide blacklisting of union activists. The impact of this was that during the middle of building boom, when the economy was crying out for skilled labour, if it was a blacklisted construction worker, you couldn't get a job. When other workers were taking their kids to Disneyland, we were defaulting on our mortgages. It was long periods of unemployment, which affected not just us, but our families. The wives of blacklisted workers have talked about getting 2 or 3 jobs in order to pay the bills. Not being able to send the kids on school trips, not being able to buy the kids trainers. One of the wives of a blacklisted worker has spoken about the decision that they took not to have a second child because of the financial hardships of being unemployed because of the blacklisting. I worked on the Jubilee line in the 1990s when they built the Jubilee line extension. I was a union safety rep on the Jubilee line. While I was there was a dispute about fire extinguishers and fire alarms not existing in London Bridge Station. A number of people who participated in that dispute ended up being put on the blacklist. Some of those workers who were blacklisted have committed suicide. I'm not saying blacklisting is the sole reason for their, for that family tragedy, but it's absolutely clear that long periods of unemployment, that family disputes and tensions, which inevitably happened because of this, cannot be beneficial to somebody's mental health. Blacklisting has contributed to people dying, and not just people dying who are on the blacklist. I was a safety rep, and I was dismissed numerous times, and those sackings are recorded in my blacklist file. If you've got a sector where safety reps who are supposed to be protected by law are repeatedly dismissed and actively sought out by the employers and dismissed because of their role of highlighting asbestos or unsafe electrical works, then that sends out a message to every other worker on that building site. If the safety rep can be sacked, then everybody else, if you want to complain about health and safety, you better keep your head down because you might lose your job as well. Blacklisting of safety reps is a contributory factor to the appalling death rate and fatality rate in the construction industry, which is historically the worst in any sector in the UK. Parliament was so outraged by the Consulting Association scandal when it broke that it introduced new legislation, the Blacklisting Regulations 2010. There was a select committee investigation into blacklisting that produced 7 separate reports, which called the blacklisting a real-life conspiracy. There was a High Court case which ended up being settled at the last minute, where the major employers paid considerable damages and made a public apology in the High Court. But, and this is the point, blacklisting and surveillance of us as union activists wasn't just carried out by the employers, it was also carried out by the police and the political policing units that are central to this public inquiry. Operation Hearn, which is the police's own internal investigation into this, has concluded, and I'll quote this, paragraph 4.2 of Operation Hearn says, police, including special branches and the security services, supplied information to the blacklist funded by the country's major construction firms, the Consulting Association and other agencies. Operation Hearn finds this allegation is proven. It goes on further and says in paragraph 13.1.2, special branches throughout the UK had direct contact with the Economic League, public authorities, private industry and the trade unions. At the very start of this inquiry, counsel for the inquiry made the following statement. The reporting of undercover officers refers to trade unions and to trade union activities of some union members. There are concerns about why such information was recorded, what it was used for, and in particular, whether it was passed to those who blacklisted workers. That is something that we can agree with the counsel for the inquiry on. We're very concerned about that. Already, in some of the disclosed documents for the inquiry, it shows that spying on left-wing union activists was part of what the SDS did, the Special Demonstration Group did. The 1972 building workers' strike and the 1972 miners' strike is mentioned in the SDS annual reports as an area that they were interested in gathering intelligence for. But SDS intelligence, how it worked was once the SDS gathered the intelligence, once the undercover officers gathered the intelligence, what it was done, it was placed on what is known as special branch registry files. You know, once the information was, once the intelligence gathered by the undercover officers was placed on the special branch registry file, this registry file became available to anybody within special branch, and as we've heard already from previous evidence, anyone from MI5 and the security service as well. The special branch registry files acted as like a central database, if you like, for information about spying on activists and also union activists. Lord Hendy has already, in his opening statement, highlighted a conference that was on the special branch registry files from 1970, in which various trade unions clearly have got individual files, individual special branch files about particular trade unions. I don't need to go over them all again, he's mentioned that. But not just particular individual trade unions, but specific industrial disputes had their own special branch files. The Shrewsbury Pickets, which I'll come back to later, the Pentonville Five, a group of dock workers who were sent to prison, the Conmec dispute, the Bryant Colours Works dispute. These were strikes that had their own special branch files, and even a rank and file union group called the Liaison Committee for the Defence of Trade Unions had its own special branch file. This inquiry will find that in 1970, Special Branch set up the Special Branch Industrial Unit. And to quote from Operation Hearn, the purpose of the industrial unit, the aim of it was monitoring of trade unionists from teaching to the docks. As well as that, the Special Branch Industrial Unit set up what they called a network of well-placed contacts within British industry. This included the directors of multinational companies, but also, according to True Spies, the True Spies documentary that has been referred to many times, included general secretaries of TUC-affiliated trade unions. The Special Branch Industrial Unit even had an official liaison officer with the Economic League. That's in Operation Hearn. All of the intelligence gathered by SDS undercover officers was available to the industrial unit, and the industrial unit was having meetings with these well-placed industry contacts, basically, and they're sharing two-way exchange of information. You know, this went on for a number of years. There's two, you know, both formal meetings and informal meetings. There is a considerable overlap between the work of, you know, the target groups of the Special Demonstration Squad and the Special Branch Industrial Units. And hardly surprising, some of the SDS officers, either before, you know, working for the SDS or after leaving the SDS, went on to work for the industrial unit. One of these officers gave evidence yesterday, which is HN 336. And in his evidence, HM 336 identified that the former head of C Squad of Special Branch, who we now know is Chief Superintendent Herbert Guy Lawrenson, known as Bert Lawrenson, the head of Special Branch C Squad at the exact same time that the SDS was set up, and who personally signed off some of the Vietnam Solidarity Campaign reports. When leaving Special Branch, he went off and joined and started working for the Economic League. Astonishingly, Operation Hearn, which was supposed to be looking into the links between Special Branch and the Economic League, does not mention the fact that Bert Lawrenson went off and worked for the Economic League. But Operation Hearn does, however, mention that there's a dedicated liaison officer from the Special Branch Industrial Unit with the Economic League. You know, basically, you've got people in the industrial unit who Bert Lawrenson used to be their boss. Bert Lawrenson trains them. He then goes off and works for the Economic League, and you've got someone in the industrial unit who's the official liaison officer. There is a relationship there between the Economic League and Special Branch Industrial Unit that needs to be investigated by this inquiry. Sorry. As well as the Special Branch registry files, the political policing units in the UK have another centralised database of activists that they spy on, which is known as the National Domestic Extremism Database. Originally, it was set up and compiled by another police unit, the National Public Order Intelligence Unit, which is also one of the main one of the main units looked at by this inquiry. But another political policing unit was also responsible for collating and adding information to the National Domestic Extremist Database, and that was NETCU. NETCU stands for the National Extremism Tactical Coordination Unit, and they are also gathering information and adding it to the Domestic Extremism Database. The Domestic Extremism Database has information on thousands of British citizens, you know, a vast swathe of them who've committed no crime whatsoever. The NETCU, who were helping compiling it, the head of NETCU, the person in charge of NETCU, was Superintendent Steve Pearl at the time, and a few years ago he gave an interview to the Daily Telegraph, and I'll quote from the Daily Telegraph. He said, the purpose of NETCU was to take over MI5's covert role, watching groups such as the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, trade union activists, and left-wing journalists. In October 2008, Detective Chief Inspector Gordon Mills from NETCU gave a PowerPoint presentation to one of the secret meetings held by the Consulting Association. These Consulting Association meetings were held once every 3 months and were organised by its chief executive, Ian Kerr. Gordon Mills gave a PowerPoint presentation, which on the PowerPoint presentation flags up that left-wing activists could be emerging threats trying to get jobs with these construction companies, and that the construction companies needed strong vetting processes to ensure that these left-wing activists didn't get jobs on their companies. Bearing in mind, he was speaking to a meeting of the Blacklisting organisation that had been secret since 1993. I think they had a pretty strong vetting system in place already. Ian Kerr, the chief executive of the Consulting Association, gave a witness statement to the High Court trial. It was never used in the High Court trial because but I've got a copy of it, in which he said, and I quote, "NETCU wanted an output for their information. I gave them the email addresses of the contacts in the construction industry, and they would feed them the information." Both the Special Branch Industrial Unit and NETCU have now been disbanded. That doesn't mean to say that their work doesn't still exist. What's happened is the people working there have now been absorbed into SO15 at the Metropolitan Police. SO15 is Counter-Terrorism Command, and spying on trade unionists is now considered, it comes under counter-terrorism. The liaison element with industry context hasn't stopped either. The liaison element of the Special Branch Industrial Unit and NETCU carries on to this day by what is known as Operation Fairway, and forgive me, this is a bit of a mouthful, another group, another political policing group known as the National Domestic Extremism and Disorder Intelligence Unit Industrial Liaison Section. The inquiry will also find that in 2010, the National Coordinator for Special Branches suggested that special branches needed to be more proactive in giving special branch briefings to industry and academics. And I seriously have to ask, when an employer is brought to a briefing and special branch tells them about individual workers, activists that are on a domestic extremism database, seriously, what do they think is going to happen to us? You know, is it going to be neutral, or is the employer going to do something with that information? Clearly, it's affected us as blacklisted trade unionists, but equally, because they're giving this information to public authorities and to universities as well, it could affect other people who are not trade unionists about getting into university, access to university. It could also affect campaign groups and their funding streams, potentially, for fighting anti-racism that has been flagged up earlier on. I now want to move on and concentrate on the core participants in this inquiry, and three of the particular concentrating on three particular undercover police officers: Peter Francis, Mark Jenner, and the officer known as Carlo Neri. So first of all, I start with Mark Jenner. I knew Mark Jenner back in the 1990s. When I knew him, his name was Mark Cassidy. He was a member of the construction union UCAT. He claimed to be a joiner, a carpenter. He was a member of Hackney branch of the construction union UCAT, which is my union. His union subs were paid by a bank account set up by a special branch. After attending meetings, this man attended meetings. We've been told by his partner at the time that after coming back from meetings, he would come back with pages and pages of handwritten notes, which would then be typed up from about what different people said at meetings. Mark Jenner also spied on a campaign group in East London called the Colin Roach Centre, which carried out multiple tasks. One of the organisations based at the Colin Roach Centre was the Hackney Trade Union Resource Centre, which meant that lots of trade union meetings took place at the centre, and lots of trade union campaign groups held their meetings at the centre. One of two small trade union groups that existed at the time at the centre was the Building Workers Safety Campaign and the Brian Higgins Defence Campaign. Mark Jenner didn't just attend these meetings. Some of the meetings, he chaired the meetings. We've actually got letters that the undercover police officer sent out to various different trade union branches across London, introducing himself as a construction worker fighting for safety on building sites, and trying to glean information from a variety of trade union branches in London at the time. Two of the core participants in this public inquiry, Brian Higgins and John Jones, were both leading members of the two campaign groups that Mark Cassidy, Mark Jenner infiltrated. Both of them have got information about those campaign groups and about the Colin Roach Centre on their blacklist files. Jenner, acting and posing as a trade union activist in the construction industry, also turned up on events organised by the Joint Sites Committee, which is a group that brings together trade union activists across various different unions in the London area. I remember him on a picket line in Waterloo about unpaid wages. I also remember him being particularly disruptive at meetings, if I'm honest. He also came into contact with other core participants at the time. Frank Smith, a core participant, is a bricklayer, heavily blacklisted since the 1990s, a UCAT branch secretary, and Steve Headley, also a core participant that appears on who appears on the blacklist. Steve Headley is now the Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Rail Union, and Mark Cassidy, Mark Jenner was spying on us as well. At one point, the Colin Roach Centre and the Hackney Trade Union Resource Centre organised a trade union delegation to visit Northern Ireland as part of the peace process at the time. Steve Headley was one of the people on that delegation, as was the undercover police officer Mark Jenner, who actually attended that, and while he was there, stayed at Steve Headley's family home in Northern Ireland. I want to move on. Trade union activism isn't just about terms and conditions. It isn't just about wages and safety. Trade unions are also proud to be anti-fascists and anti-racists. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something we're proud of, that we're opposed to fascism. In the period of these undercover officers' deployment, British National Party thugs and their paramilitary terrorist wing Combat 18 were terrorising the streets of East London. Racist attacks skyrocketed at the time. Family homes were being petrol bombed. Union offices were being attacked, including at the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, when the union offices there were smashed up, all the computers were smashed up, and swastikas were daubed all over the walls. The increase in racial attacks coincided with the atrocious murders of Stephen Lawrence and Ricky Reel, which it just puts it in context about what was going on at the time, those tragedies. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that trade unions and labour movement campaigns, especially around election time, often asked for union people to come and steward their meetings against attacks from the fascist thugs, and trade unions from the construction industry were invited a lot to provide stewarding, to defend electioneering and outside counts and that kind of stuff. And some of the activists who are core participants in this group were part of those stewarding things, and one of the sort of ad hoc networks that we were talked about was called the Away Team. We were all spied on because of our involvement with the Away Team as well. Finishing with Mark Jenner, I just want to say one thing. For the record, we accuse Mark Jenner, and through Mark Jenner, the British state, of deliberately interfering with the internal democratic processes of an independent trade union. By covertly joining the union, by participating in debates within the union, by voting on motions that were sent to national conference and to the regional council, by participating in executive council elections, by actually distributing material, arguing for a UCAT convener to be sacked, and being disruptive in the meeting, causing a division within the union. That is how they have interfered with the democratic processes of an independent trade union. This is in direct contravention of international law that has been ratified by the UK, specifically ILO Convention 87 and the European Convention of Human Rights, Article 11. One more trade unionist I need to mention that Jenner spied on was, of course, Alison, who he had a 5-year relationship with, who's also a core participant in this inquiry. Alison was a National Union of Teacher activist during all this period. I'll let Alison, you've heard from Alison's lawyer already. When Jenner's deployment come to an end, another police officer turned up to spy on virtually the same activists, and this one was the officer that went under the name of Carl O'Neary. On more than one occasion, Carl O'Neary encouraged core participants, Frank Smith and Dan Gilman, and another trade union activist Joe Batty, who hasn't been granted core participant status, to firebomb a charity shop. The undercover officer claimed that the charity shop was run by an Italian fascist by the name of Roberto Fiore, who was the leader of the Italian fascist party known as Forza Nuova, who was on the run from Italy after being wanted by the Italian police in connection with the Bologna train station bombing of 1980, where 85 innocent people were killed. For the record, we accuse Carlo Neri of being an argent provocateur. He deliberately set out to entrap those trade union activists and to get them sent to prison. For the record, the trade union activists, these people are trade union activists and anti-racist campaigners. They completely refuse to have anything to do with it because they're not terrorists and never have been terrorists, despite how the undercover officer tried to entrap them. Carlo Neri also had a long-term relationship with another core participant, or a number of core participants in this public inquiry, specifically a friend of mine, Donna McLean. Towards the end of the deployment, Carlo Neri manufactured a split from Donna McLean, and when he claimed to be homeless, actually moved in with Steve Headley into his house as a lodger. In 2004, Steve Headley was dismissed because of a dispute on the Channel Tunnel rail link at the time, where there was a big campaign to get him reinstated, and Carlo Neri, the undercover police officer, turned up on the picket line to spy on the union activists there, no doubt. There is a restriction order which says I am not allowed to use the real name of Carlo Neri during this, during my opening statement. But I am allowed to say that I personally have known Carlo Neri's real name for more than 5 years. As a group of activists and with the undercover research group, we found out that he was a police officer more than 5 years ago. When I published a book in 2016, we decided not to publish his real name out of respect for the family. But for the last 18 months, Carlo Neri's real name has been in the public domain. Last week, I heard Rajiv Menon QC be told that he would be silenced if he asked a question that the chair to the inquiry did not like or did not think was appropriate. I'm not a Queen's Counsel. I'm a construction worker who's looking to get the truth for me and my friends about how we were spied on by the British state, but I will not be silenced. 4 weeks ago, I wrote an article for Tribune magazine about the bill going through Parliament at the moment, the Covert Human Intelligence Source bill, which would allow undercover officers in future complete immunity from prosecution for committing any crime, including rape, murder, and torture. In order to highlight this, I cited Carlo Neri's incitement to commit arson as part of the article, and the article published Carlo Neri's real name. Neither I nor Tribune magazine, by publishing that, have breached the restriction order. But inside this inquiry, I'm not allowed to mention Carlo Neri's real name. This seemed, the public inquiry was set up to get to the truth and uncover what was going on. But inside the inquiry, I'm not allowed to mention it. On Sunday night, I watched BBC TV like millions of other people. I watched the Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials drama on TV. And actually coming into this public inquiry seems like stepping into an alternate universe. You know, and just to be clear, it's the alternate universe that's a bit sinister, where the magisterium cling on to power by holding on to an outmoded view of the world, denying people to be able to see the truth, and deciding what people are allowed to know and what they're not allowed to know. I'll move on. The state did not just spy on us as trade unions. The evidence that was gathered, the intelligence that was gathered by the SDS officers was passed on to the blacklist. I will give some examples. One glaring example comes from the deployment of Peter Francis during the early 1990s. Peter Francis has admitted that he was sent in. One of the people he was sent in to spy on was Frank Smith, the blacklisted core participant I've already mentioned, and his girlfriend at the time, Lisa Teuscher. Peter Francis has admitted that he was the person who opened the special branch registry file on Frank Smith, and that there's information on the special branch registry file that talks about Frank Smith's role in the away team and his relationship with Lisa Teuscher. Frank Smith's blacklist file from the Consultant Association, and I'll read it now, and I quote, says Frank Smith is under constant watch officially and considered to be politically dangerous. Peter Francis has said this virtually mirrors the language that is on his special branch file. What I would like to know, and what the core participants in the union strand would like to know, is how could the Blacklist organisation possibly know that Frank Smith was being spied on by the state and kept under surveillance by the state if that information wasn't provided by the security services and special branch somehow? Peter Francis also spied on and opened a file on Lisa Teuscher. She was a leading figure in the anti-racist campaign Youth Against Racism in Europe. He was also tasked by the Home Office to look into Lisa Teuscher's immigration status because she's an American citizen. And for 7 years during that period, Lisa Teuscher's passport was taken from her and held by the Home Office while she went through an appeal because indefinite leave to remain was going to be removed. Lisa Teuscher describes that as traumatic at the time. What we also find is that Lisa Teuscher, despite never having worked in the construction industry ever, has got a Consultant Association blacklist file. And what does it say in the blacklist file? Two things. Number one, that she is the girlfriend of Frank Smith. And number two, that she's been involved in several marriages of convenience. Once again, virtually similar to the stuff that was reported that Peter Francis says he put on Lisa Teuscher's special branch file. Once again, we ask, how is it possible that a manager on a building site, who is the normal route of feeding up information to the blacklist files, would possibly know this? You know, this information has clearly come from special branch or the police somehow. Let me be clear. No one is suggesting that Peter Francis or any of the individual Special Demonstration Squad officers has personally handed over this information to the Consultant Association or the Economic League. That was not their job. The job of liaising with industry contacts was was from the Special Branch Industrial Unit. That was their role, and NETCU, whose job was liaison with industry. It was through those mechanisms that the information got on to those processes, those meetings, that the information got onto the blacklist files. Another glaring example that appears on a blacklist file is an incident in the Cenotaph in 1999. Every year, the National Front lays a wreath at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday. That a racist and anti-Semitic organisation whose members have been involved in sort of fascist violence is allowed to lay a wreath at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday has always been controversial, but they do it every year. In 1999, there was a counter demonstration, and three core participants, Frank Smith, Dan Gilman, and Steve Headley, participated in the counter demonstration. Operation Hearn has already admitted that their participation in on that demonstration is reported and recorded on special branch files. Literally within days of it appearing on the special branch files, the same information also appears on their blacklist files. Once again, we're not suggesting that an individual police officer on the day passed over the information to the blacklist. This comes through liaison with industry contacts. The information about the Cenotaph and the information on Frank Smith's, Steve Headley's, and Dan Gilman's information is recorded as coming from the company Costain. The main contacts for Costain, the construction company Costain, are known to have had relationships with special branch officers. I will name them: Dudley Barrett, who's now retired, and Gail Burton, who's now a senior executive on the working for the Jockey Club. The only possible plausible explanation for how the information about the Cenotaph incident ended up on the blacklist files is if someone from Special Branch told one of these Costain's managers that about it. That's the only possible way. Any other suggestion about how it got on there, quite honestly, is laughable. I keep coming. I'm going to come back to this. If the purpose of spying on us, which has been dressed up all the way through this, is to stop public disorder and serious criminality, then we've had 3 undercover police officers spying on us for over 10 years. Why were none of us arrested? Why have none of us been charged with these serious disorder offences that supposedly we were being spied on? That's because, in reality, police spying, the SDS spying, political policing in this country, that's what it's about. It's not about stopping public disorder. It's about spying on people that the British state consider to be inconvenient to them, and that means, left-wing trade unionists. We accuse Special Branch Intelligence Unit, Industrial Unit, and NETCU of supplying information to the employers and to the blacklist. The ideological mindset behind Special Branch spying on us as left-wing union activists and the blacklist spying on us as left-wing trade union activists is absolutely identical. There's actually, we've got Special Branch people going off and working for the Economic League. The ideological mindset is identical. It's hardly surprising that they shared information with each other, despite what the designated lawyers said on the first couple of days. The police are not neutral in this. The British state is not neutral in any major dispute between big business and trade unions. The state is on the side of the major companies. the Special Demonstration Squad is not a rogue unit. The supplying of information to the blacklist isn't some aberration. It's standard operating procedure for how the British state will work and link and liaise with big business. Core participants in this strand, demand to know what went on. We want to know the mechanics. We want to know the justification behind this. This isn't a trial. We expect a narrative verdict to explain what went on and how our information was passed on. There are 8 core participants in this public inquiry who've been spied on in the Union strand, but we were not the only Union members who were spied on by the undercover police. There are 7 million Union members in the UK. To this day, we're still the biggest civil society voluntary organisations, and the police try and dress it up as, we were just spying on individual members, not trade unions. Being a trade union member isn't a business relationship, a contractual relationship with a union. The members are the union. That's how it works. We're not something separate. There's a saying in the trade union movement that an injury to one is an injury to all. It doesn't matter to us what someone's race is, what someone's gender is, what someone's class is, or what their political orientation is. If someone's in trouble, we help them. That's called solidarity. And 7 million trade union members, 7 million members of the British public want to know whether their union branches were infiltrated. They want to know whether information was passed on about their trade union reps. To dress it up as anything else, if they're spying on union members, they're spying on trade unions. To dress it up as anything else is complete smoke and mirrors. And there's an explicit requirement in the terms of reference for this public inquiry to look into what was done with the intelligence gathered by these SDS officers. Not just what they did when they were on deployment, but what happened with what the intelligence was used for afterwards. Yes, it's time for the police to come clean on this. Yes, we want to know the cover names of the undercover officers. Yes, we want to know the 1,000 groups that were spied on, but we want to know much more than that. Which other union members lost their jobs because of information passed on to them by police liaison officers. We want Special Branch Industrial Unit to name the key industrial contacts and the companies that were provided with information about trade union members. And if, as it said in the True Spies programme, if any of those key industrial members were union officials, the Blacklist Support Group wants the union officials to be named as well. In construction, we've found our blacklist. It's been discovered. But there are plenty of other blacklists as well. In the North Sea, there's a system called Not Required Back, which is effectively a blacklist for anyone who complains about safety in the North Sea. In the BBC, for many years, there was an MI5 officer actually literally based in the BBC buildings. They had something called a staff transfer register for left-wing activists, left-wing members who were working for the BBC. During the Thatcher period, there was a blacklist set up called the Subversion in Public Life blacklist, which was provided information by the security services. In the retail sector, there's a blacklist called the National Staff Dismissals Register, which was actually part funded by £1 million grant from the Home Office. We expect these to be looked into, if the police have provided information. And just to be clear, in 2002, when the BBC documentary True Spies came out, one of the special branch officers in the programme talked about a blacklist, talked about Special Branch being given a list of names by Ford Motor Company at their Ford Howard plant factory in Liverpool, and I quote from basically for the special branch to check the names for when people are applying for jobs. And the officer says this, and I quote, "It was very, very important that trade unions were monitored. We were expected to check these lists. You can call it blacklisting, and that's what it was. In any war, there are going to be casualties." Seriously? In any war? This is a special branch officer. Like, you know, a trade union is meant to be the enemy within. You know, the Blacklist Support Group needs to know if any intelligence from any of these undercover units was passed on to any of these blacklists. And for the record, we don't think these are the only blacklists. We believe that blacklisting in some description takes place in every sector of the UK economy, but it's often hidden, as is the police involvement in it. I'm getting close to the end, believe. Another important aspect for us is about what happens to the undercover officers or the police spies after they left working for the police. I've already mentioned the head of C squad in Special Branch, Bert Lawrenson, who went off to work for the Economic League, but there are others. Assistant Chief Constable Anton Setchell, who was the head of UK political policing between 2004 and 2010. Upon retirement, he went off to work for Lang O'Rourke's as their head of security. Lang O'Rourke's was one of the blacklisting companies. Superintendent Steve Pearl, who I mentioned before from Netco, he went off to work for a company called Agenda Security. Barry Gain, the deputy head of MI6, he went off to work for an organisation called Threat Response International. Both organisations, both companies that are engaged in spying on activists for corporate clients. Another company that spies on activists for corporate clients and employs ex-state spies is an organisation called Control Risks. It's been in the press that Control Risk had a £59,000 contract with Crossrail, a publicly funded body, to spy on union activists applying for work on that project. One of the activists spied on, his name was Frank Smith. Sorry, start again. One of the activists spied on was a shop steward, a Unites the Union shop steward called Frank Morris. He was the first ever shop steward elected on the project. Literally within days, he was sacked from the job. What we want to know is all of these ex-police spies and managers in these units who have gone off to work for the private sector, are they using their influence to garner information for their corporate role? But more than that, because of mass privatisation that has happened across the entire public sector, has state spying that was previously carried out by the police, has any of that been privatised? They've privatised the role of the army. You know, we've got security contractors, privatised security contractors working in Iraq and Afghanistan. Has the British state privatised any of this state spying? Because if there is, who have they given the contracts to? How much taxpayers' money have they been getting? And are they exempt from freedom of information and public scrutiny? Because it's very difficult to say where that comes from. You know, for this to work, then we have to be skeptical, and we have to go, for this inquiry to work, we have to actually go in and find out this information. But unfortunately, you know, far from the police providing us with this information, every step of the way, they have stopped giving us information and tried to stop it. One of the core participants in this public inquiry in the Union Strand is an electrician called Steve Aitchison. Steve Aitchison stood on a picket line for 3 years up in Manchester, along with two other electricians, in order to expose the blacklist. Eventually, a whistleblower came forward and told us about the Consultant Association, gave a witness statement at Steve Aitchison's employment tribunal. It's Steve Aitchison and other activists in this inquiry who have exposed the blacklist and exposed what's going on with the undercover police, not the police. In fact, at every step of the way, the police have tried to stop the truth getting out. When the Blacklist Support Group first put in a complaint about police spying being provided to the blacklist, we put in a complaint in 2012. The Met Police refused to even accept the complaint, refused to accept it. It was only after an appeal by Imran Khan and partners that it was passed on to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and within a few days, the IPCC said it is likely that all special branches were involved in providing information about prospective employees. Almost immediately, Chief Constable Mick Creedon, who was in charge of the Hearn report, said that no such evidence exists. We now know this to be simply untrue. The evidence does exist. But once again, it's an example of how the police have tried to obstruct this inquiry. Another example is NetCou. Come back to NetCou. NetCou was specifically set up, the organisation that gave the PowerPoint presentation at the Consultant Association meeting, that was specifically set up outside of the remit of the police. Even though everyone working in it was a serving police officer, even though it was funded by the Home Office, it was under the remit of the Association of Chief Police Officers, which means it's exempt from freedom of information requests. I've put in freedom of information requests to NetCou to find out about the Woodstock, the meeting that that NetCou gave to the Consultant Association. And we have been told repeatedly that no documents from NetCou exist, that they have all been destroyed. This is a police unit that existed for 7 years, that the officers working in it had meetings with industry over a 7-year period. They produced reports, they sent emails, they sent correspondence, they did PowerPoint presentations, and we're meant to believe that not a single document exists. That NetCou has now been subsumed into the Metropolitan Police, but we're meant to believe that all of these documents have now been destroyed, and not one of them was worthy of carrying over to what were these police officers doing for 7 years, if not one of the documents was worth carrying over. When we're told that all of these documents have been destroyed and none of them exist anymore, I'll go out on a limb and say that is a blatant lie. We are being lied to. That some of these documents still exist and some of these documents are still being accessed by the police now. Now, we've got a choice here. We either believe that the police are capable of lying, or we've got to believe that everything the police tell us is absolutely the truth. Ask the families of the football fans who died at Hillsborough. Ask the miners who were falsely imprisoned at Algrave. Ask the Birmingham Six whether the police lie. Okay, the police lie. This is not name calling like the lawyers for the Metropolitan Police Service suggested at the beginning. These are political policing units that we are being investigated during this public inquiry. These police units lie. They've been trained to lie. This inquiry needs to be sceptical about this. Unfortunately, the scepticism, the benefit of the doubt seems to be given to the police time and time again. We've been told by the police that throughout its 40 years of this investigation, only one police officer actually joined a trade union, was a member of a trade union. We had a meeting in 2018 with the inquiry team, and you, the chair, reinforced this, that the police had said that only one police officer during the entire 40-year period had actually joined a trade union. Look, I'm not a lawyer, but I imagine that when barristers meet each other at a social event, that they talk to each other about what chambers they went, they're at, or what posh school they went to. In the trade union movement, we don't do that. in the labour movement, we talk to each other and we ask each other which union you're a member of. Any undercover police officer who was spying on any kind of long-term deployment, who was spying on union activists, who wasn't a member of a trade union, would stick out like a sore thumb. So I do not for 1 minute believe that there's only one police officer in this inquiry that joined a trade union. The other thing is to do with our police files. All of the core participants, we wouldn't be core participants unless the police had told us that we were spied on and that we had police files. I have applied to get a copy of my police file, and like other core participants, I've been told the police can neither confirm nor deny whether they hold any information on me, not just about me, but even about the Blacklist Support Group. They can neither confirm nor deny whether they hold any information on us. And the reason they give is national security. So much for transparency. So much for transparency. We had a meeting with you as the chair of this inquiry in July 2018. And during that meeting, we specifically asked if two core participants, Brian Higgins and John Jones, could be provided with their police files, because both of them were seriously ill, and both of them are in their late 70s. And we were given assurances that as much as physically possible, that would be handed over to those people. 2 years later, those files, police files, have still not been handed over to John Jones and Brian Higgins. Brian Higgins passed away in June 2019. Seriously, what possible national security threat can there be that a dying man isn't allowed to see a copy of a file that the police produced on him, wrote about him in the 1990s? I am in touch with Brian Higgins' family, and I'm putting it politely by saying that they're not very happy with the way that they've been treated, either by the police or by this inquiry. Those are not the only documents that the Blacklist Support Group haven't been allowed to see. The only evidence from Tranche 1 that we've been disclosed to us so far are the Special Demonstration Squad annual reports and the Operation Hearn investigation. This inquiry starts in 1968. Blacklisted workers, represented by the Blacklist Support Group, have got files that go back to the early 1960s. There are, so we feel we're entitled to see these documents, but the only ones we've seen are Operation Hearn and the SDS reports. Just quickly want to mention Operation Hearn if they're going to be core documents in this inquiry. Operation Hearn was the internal investigation set up by the police to look into allegations that they supplied information to the blacklist. What is noticeable in it is the use of language. All the way through it, it talks about alleged victimisation, supposed blacklisting that was going on. This is despite the fact that the officers compiling it had full access to the full Consulting Association blacklist database, despite the fact that Parliament passed legislation directly because of this blacklist, despite the fact there's been numerous employment tribunals where the written judgment condemned the blacklist, and there was a high court trial in which all of the employers admit doing it and have made a public apology. There are 74 appendices in the Operation Hearn, including an interview with the Special Branch Liaison Officer with the Economic League. The Blacklist Support Group hasn't been shown any of those appendices whatsoever. All we've got is a heavily redacted version of the report. What I will say, because it'd be, be rude of me not to, is thank you very much to the officers, because one of the things that they do highlight is that the book that myself and investigative journalist Phil Chamberlain wrote and published in 2015, the police describe it as the most comprehensive collection of material on the subject. Thanks very much. We'll be using that in our marketing from now on. But what it also demonstrates is that testimony from the activists, what the activists have found out, is going to be just as comprehensive as the stuff that the police have found out. And actually, the activist testimony should be given just as much, if not more weight, than the police. I'm literally in the final furlong, so forgive me. In addition, you've got the SDS annual reports. Now, look, we've seen these annual reports. We're meant to see these as like key evidence in these in this inquiry. I'm a shareholder in various blacklisted construction companies, and every year I get sent an annual report when it comes up to their AGM. And what it does is it tells you what the company's been up to, where they're earning money, where they're, where around the world they've been involved. But I'll tell you what it never mentions. It never mentions how many fatalities they've had on their building sites. It never mentions when they've been prosecuted for human rights abuse or when they've been prosecuted for health and safety violations. Not once have I seen it mentioned that they were involved in blacklisting or they paid out millions of pounds at a high court trial or did a public apology. And I don't expect it to, because what that document is, what the annual report for the corporations are PR exercises to give them to shareholders to make sure they've got a guaranteed funding stream to carry on in the future. And that's what the SDS reports are as well. They are PR exercises sent to people who are going to provide the SDS money in the future, and they should be viewed in exactly the same way. They are not a full and transparent review of what the SDS actually got up to during that period. Having said that, even the heavily redacted versions we have got do flag up that there's information relevant to trade unionists and the union strand. One of the things that they identify is that one of the organisations infiltrated by the SDS was the Shrewsbury 2 defence campaign. The Shrewsbury 2 was a campaign related to the Des Warren and Ricky Tomlinson, the Shrewsbury pickets who were sent to prison after the 1972 construction workers' strike. Notorious miscarriage of justice in which the police and the security services colluded to get these 2 construction workers sent to prison. 50 years after the case, more than 50 years after the case, the Home Secretary still refuses to release the government files relating to the Shrewsbury pickets because of national security reasons. This is screaming of a establishment cover-up, absolutely screaming of it. One of the blacklisted workers who used to speak on behalf of the Blacklist Support Group, his name was Mick Abbott. He was a scaffolder. His blacklist file starts in 1964. He was one of the key leading members of the Shrewsbury 2 defence campaign, and his blacklist file is covered with information relating to his campaigning on behalf of the Shrewsbury 2. If the police were spying on the Shrewsbury 2 defence campaign, it's almost implausible that they weren't spying on Mick Abbott. Mick Abbott also passed away. He passed away in 2014. So once again, we'll never know. The other thing that the annual reports mention is the 1972 construction workers' strike, building workers' strike, being an important element of what the SDS were interested in at that point. The blacklisted workers from that period, they're literally the people who led the dispute. They are, their blacklist files are covered with stuff relating to the 1972 builder strike. It's implausible that if the SDS was spying on the building workers strike in 1972, that the blacklisted workers that we represent were not spied on as well. As it is at the moment, the Blacklist Support Group has been denied access to all of the tranche 1 evidence, which also means that our lawyers haven't been able to ask questions of any of the other witnesses. Far from being transparent and getting to the truth, what we've got in this public inquiry so far are barriers. What we've got at the moment are restrictions. I've, as you're aware, I've tested positive for COVID. The only way I can see the public, the only way it's possible to view what's going on in this inquiry is to register my that I want to come and see it online. If I'm selected, I have to travel during a COVID lockdown to a hotel in London to watch the inquiry via a TV screen, something that I cannot do. When the police officers are giving oral evidence, you can't even see that. What we've got is some kind of, it's like going back to the 80s, got a CFAX, watching the inquiry via CFAX, where you've got a typed transcript coming up, which literally doesn't work. It doesn't work. And if, rather than taking my word for it, let's take the Home Affairs correspondent for the BBC, who's the lead correspondent for the BBC for this public inquiry, Dominic Cassiani, who has tweeted the following, and I quote, relating to the live transcript, which is the only way supposedly to follow it. This is what the chief correspondent for the public inquiry for the state broadcaster says. It is virtually unusable for reporters trying to follow it remotely. The words are appearing via a fast-scrolling video feed that can't be paused or can't be rewound. This basically means, from a practical perspective as a working reporter, that a public inquiry becomes largely impossible to report. In the last few days, I've heard you, Chair, state at the beginning of the hearings that members of the public are entitled to hear the same public evidence as I will hear, and you are entitled to reach your own conclusions about it. I say simply, in all practical senses, that's not true. Most people find out what's going on from the public inquiry from the media. Even if I wanted to, I can't go to this hotel and find out this because of the restrictions that you as the chair have imposed. It would be easy to allow the public, a simple thing would allow the public to be able to follow this and for the media to be able to report it properly. And that would be to live stream all of the evidence. That is what is happening in the Grenfell Tower public inquiry at the moment, but that is not what's happening in this public inquiry. From where I'm standing at the moment, instead of being transparent and open, what this looks like is we're watching a good old-fashioned establishment cover-up unfolding before our eyes. In conclusion, this is my last paragraph or so. Blacklisted workers, our experience of the British legal system doesn't give us optimism that the British state investigating wrongdoings of the British state is necessarily going to come up with justice. 700 blacklisted workers were claimants in a trial, and the multinational companies were literally allowed to buy themselves out of a trial. That is not justice. We do not expect this public inquiry to provide justice. Our participation in this inquiry is with a slim hope that through the process, more and more evidence will become uncovered, that will come to light about the anti-union hostility of the upper echelons of the British secret political policing units. They have a mindset which is still back in that colonial period mindset, which, of, and institutional racism, institutional sexism, working class hostility, hostility to trade unions. We do not expect justice. Our participation is we will shake the tree as much as possible and see what comes out. We want to expose what these police units have been doing in the name of the British taxpayer so that it's exposed. Keeping it hidden does nothing for justice, but also does nothing for the British public, who are meant to be reassured after, we get to the truth in this. The police lawyers will argue that the undercover police officers were doing what they were doing in order to protect democracy. When they're spying on trade unionists, when they're providing information to blacklist organisations to stop trade union activists getting jobs, that is not defending democracy. That is defending big business and capitalism. And for the avoidance of all doubt,